Hi kittens, Mrs. Prowl here, taking you through how to fully develop those ideas and prove to your reader why your examples prove your thesis to be true. The prompt that we're going to be using today is one that we worked with last week. Write an essay explaining why it is important to honor a commitment. So in your thesis statement, you would of course use keywords from the prompt, right? It is important to honor a commitment. But then you've got to give your own opinion and reason why. So it is important to honor a commitment. Why? Well, because other people depend on you to keep your word. Then you can start to go into your body paragraph. And for this first body paragraph, we're going to use the example from Of Mice and Men, the novel that we read this year. So most of you are doing this part, but we're missing the other three down the line. So when you're giving your example, of course, introduce Of Mice and Men to your reader, right? Of Mice and Men, the novel by John Steinbeck, is about two men that travel together, George and Lenny. And then we can go into our specific example. George honors his commitment to protect Lenny from harm by preventing Lenny from dying a horrible and painful death. So we have our reason that supports our thesis. But now we have to talk about how that example proves the reason to be true. We're going to start this with when. So after you give your specific example, you need to dig deeper into a moment, an event, a plot point in the story where we see this. So we're going to use when and write as I write. Lenny disobeys George and commits a crime, and we remember that crime was killing Curly's wife. So when Lenny disobeys George and commits a crime, George protects Lenny from being tortured by Curly by ending Lenny's life. Okay. We have to give this type of detail, because if we just say George shot Lenny and that's keeping a commitment, that doesn't show our reader that that was actually an act of mercy and an act of honoring his commitment to Lenny. So we have to show our reader through digging deeper into our examples. Then we connect to the thesis explicitly. So when we connect to the thesis, we're going to say, okay, I just gave this example, and this proves my thesis to be true because. So we're saying the fact that George honors his commitment to protect Lenny from harm, even though Lenny is a criminal, proves that he keeps his word. And then lastly, we end with an if sentence to flip it around and say, what would have happened if George did not honor his commitment? So we can say, if George would not have honored his commitment to protect Lenny, Curly would have mercilessly tortured and eventually killed Lenny in a horrific way. All right, let's read our complete body paragraph together so that we have a full understanding of how this really shows the reader that your example is meaningful, okay? George honors his commitment to protect Lenny from harm by preventing Lenny from dying a horrible and painful death. When Lenny disobeys George and commits a crime, George protects Lenny from being tortured by Curly by ending Lenny's life. The fact that George honors his commitment to protect Lenny from harm, even though Lenny is a criminal, proves that he keeps his word. If George would not have honored his commitment to protect Lenny, Curly would have mercilessly tortured and eventually killed Lenny in a horrific way. This is a complete body paragraph that connects your example back to the prompt. All right, we're going to do one more example on page 9. Stick with me. So we're using the same prompt. This would be our second body paragraph. And we're going to look this time at Lilo and Stitch. Okay, so we said that second half of our thesis statement is, why is it important to honor a commitment? Well, it is important to honor a commitment because other people depend on you to keep your word. All right, our first example says Lilo honors her commitment to never leave a family member behind by advocating for her big sister to keep Stitch as a pet. Now, again, we start with that word when. So we're getting even more detailed into what is going on in our story. When Stitch destroys Lilo's home, Lilo's sister becomes angry and tells Lilo to get rid of Stitch. Lilo stands up for Stitch by calling him a family member. Now we're starting with the fact that. So we can say the fact that Lilo honors her commitment to never leave a family member behind proves that it is important to keep your word because people depend on you. Now we're going to close out with an if statement. So we have to think about what would happen if Lilo would not have kept her commitment to Stitch. So we can say if Lilo would not have honored her commitment to Stitch, Stitch would have been imprisoned or worse, terminated by his home planet. Now we can read our entire example together to get our full second body paragraph. So starting with our specific example. Lilo honors her commitment to never leave a family member behind by advocating for her big sister to keep Stitch as a pet. When Stitch destroys Lilo's home, Lilo's sister becomes angry and tells Lilo to get rid of Stitch. Lilo stands up for Stitch by calling him a family member. The fact that Lilo honors her commitment to never leave a family member behind proves that it is important to keep your word because people depend on you. If Lilo would not have honored her commitment to Stitch, Stitch would have been imprisoned or, worse, terminated by his home planet. And we have a fully developed second body paragraph that connects to our thesis. Your next step is to try this on your own. So you have page 10 for your first body paragraph and page 11 for your second body paragraph. Remember to restate your reason at the top. That's your answer to the thesis question. You may use one of 3 samples of writing. First, if you like, you can use the Of Mice and Men essay. Second, you can use the same prompt that I did, why it is important to honor a commitment. Or, if you do not have any writing samples available, you can flip back to your packet to page 16 and use today's prompt, which is write an essay explaining whether failure can strengthen a person. Work through these 2 on your own. You got this.